100 acres of land. The first thing they'll say is Black people didn't get any land. No,
Not true.
true. So,
I'm going to pause the recording because I don't need that to start right now. Hello, everybody. Do you want to go ahead and welcome us, Mia?
Oh, I thought you was going to give the housekeeping rules before we begin.
Okay, I will.
As a reminder, if you have questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A or chat room, and they will be answered at the end of the presentation. Also, I ask that you actually stay to the end because there will be a nice giveaway, which you normally do with our spin the wheel. Now, I would like to turn it over to our board member, Tyra Margin Sutton. She has the honor of introducing our featured speaker.
Thank you, Mia. Hello, everyone. I am Tyra Margin Sutton, and I am here to introduce our featured speaker. Our speaker today is Bernice Alexander Bennett, author of Black Homesteaders of the South. Bernice Alexander Bennett is an award-winning author, genealogist, nationally recognized guest speaker, storyteller, producer, host of the podcast Research at the National Archives and beyond. She is also the first recipient of the Ida B. Wells Service Award given by the Sons and Daughters of the United States Middle Passage for her dedication to broadcasting stories about enslaved and indentured ancestors of African descent. In addition, she received the African American Historical and Genealogical Society Elizabeth Clark Lewis Genealogy Award in 2019 for original research to support African American genealogy. Bennett is a former member of the Board of Directors for the National Genealogical Society, co-founder and faculty member of the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute, a volunteer with the Homestead National Historical Park Service, and former citizens archivist with the Civil War digitization project of the National Archives and Records Administration. Bennett, a New Orleans native and descendant of homesteader Peter Clark of Livingston Parish, is committed to encouraging other descendants to write and share their family stories. So without further ado, I give to you Bernice Alexander Bennett.
okay, hello everyone, and thank you so much for that introduction. And also, I want to just thank the board members for their support of this entire presentation. And so today I will be talking about the Black homesteaders of the South. Actually, I'm going to talk about the untold stories of Black homesteaders. Now, the Black homesteaders of the South tell stories of resilience and celebrates individuals, some of whom were formerly enslaved, but were able, after their emancipation, to obtain up to 160 acres of public land under the Homestead Act of 1862. So I have already provided you with a time frame. So what I will do today is give you an overview of this act, talk about the eligibility requirements. I'll also give you some idea about what it takes, the application process, the land entry papers, what is a land patent, and then I will provide you with some examples, little vignettes of individuals that obtain their land. So let's start off with the Homestead Act. Well, this act was signed by President Abraham Lincoln on May 20th, 1862. And it went into effect January 1st, 1863. So all of the land that we're talking about now will be land from 1862 forward. We're not going back into 1850, 1830, and what have you. Okay, so many African Americans in 1862 really were not eligible for this land. But let me just let you know, there are certain requirements to obtain this land. The individuals had to be over the age of 21 and head of the household. They could never take up arms against the United States. Single women, widows, immigrants, and later former slaves could apply for this land. Now, there's also what I call the land acquisition process. And basically, you'll read that there are 3 steps. Well, I'm just filling in some of those steps. First of all, they had to settle on the land. They had to file an application and pay a small filing fee. Some paid up to $14. They had to cultivate, improve, and live on the land for a minimum of 5 years. They had to bring witnesses. This is the exciting part. They had to bring witnesses and post their intentions in the newspaper. And then they had to file for a deed of title and pay another small fee. So let's look at this slide. This particular poster was sent to me back in 2012, and it commemorated the 150th anniversary of the Homestead Act. Now, when you look at this poster, what do you see? Free land. I mean, can you imagine free land being given to people in the United States? Millions of acres of free land. You also see the word American Dream. And if you look at the middle of this poster, you will see an African American family. So let's think about this for a minute, because you're talking about the American dream, right? We're talking about education. We're talking about the right to vote. We're talking about wages, working for wages, not working free, religious freedom, safety, land, and home ownership. And I know some of you may wonder, wait a minute, this is 1862. So think about what was going on in 1862. We were at war. So many of the individuals that were formerly enslaved at that time, they were not considered citizens. And so we had several Reconstruction amendments. You know, Congress passed 3 constitutional amendments that permanently abolished slavery, defined birthright citizenship, and guaranteed due process and equal protection under the law, and granted all males the ability to vote by prohibiting voter discrimination based on race, color, or previous condition. So now we're saying you're looking at this period of what was going on between 1865 and 1870. So I'm just kind of putting everything into context for you all. In 1865, you know, we're talking about, well, what's going on now? We're looking at the war being over, close to being over. And it was the creation of the Bureau of, we call the Freedmen Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. And this was created in 1865. So the Freedmen Bureau was really designed to help free people establish schools, purchase land, locate family members, and legalize marriages. The Bureau also supplied necessities such as food and clothing and operated hospitals. They did just a lot. Also, the Bureau was called upon to administer another act, and it was called the Homestead Act of 1866. Now, this act really opened up to 46 million acres of land in the southern states of Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Florida, and Alabama. Actually, individuals could get up to 80 acres of land under this particular act. However, this act was repealed July 4th, 1876, because it was poorly administered. You know, in order to get this land, you had to have land offices, you had to have all the bureaucracy that goes along with getting land. All of this had to have been in place, and it wasn't. And you also had individuals that were saying, no, you can't get my land. You know, some of those folks that were in the Confederacy were like, no, not quite. In fact, when I started looking to find out what was going on with this act, I found a newspaper article in the Times-Picayune dated the 6th of October, 1866. And this paper, I mean, it gave instructions to people. It stated, you know, how many acres they would give. It also indicated that they only had to pay a $5 fee, $5. It extended to all citizens of the United States without distinction as a race or color. So keep in mind that we're talking about land, and it's not going to say on that application Black, it's not going to say on that application white. There's no distinction, which means that everyone has this opportunity to apply for this land. I also found another article, and this is basically almost 10 years later, the New Orleans Daily Democrat. And this was an article dated August 20th, 1878. And what I discovered in this article is that no entries in the southern states were even recorded until 1866. And in Louisiana, not until 1867 on account of the war. But all the other places, they did document that they had people applying for this land. Now, I want to take you back for a minute because I did mention the Freedmen Bureau. And the reason I'm showing you this Freedmen Bureau labor contract, it's because my ancestor is actually on this labor contract. In fact, I could tell you, this is one man that I have documented from enslavement to land ownership. And I'll say more about that. We also had individuals, as I mentioned, on labor contracts, which means they didn't really get a whole lot of money, but that's what happened after the Civil War. We had individuals that participated in the sharecropping system. And when you understand sharecropping, this was a legal arrangement with regard to agricultural land in which a landowner allows a tenant to use the land in return for a share of the crops produced on that land. But let's face it, sharecropping was not land ownership. So let's take a look at this map. Now, all of the states in brown are public land states. So if any of you, I saw somebody, Missouri, if any of you are looking for your land owning ancestors, if you have land owning ancestors in any of these 30 states in brown, these are the places you should look. Those that have ancestors from the 13 original colonies in Texas, those are not public land states. You would not find a homesteader in that state. But remember, I did mention Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, and Louisiana are places that you could find your land owning ancestor. Now, let me just give you an idea how I got involved in looking for Black homesteaders. The Homestead National Historical Park is located in Nebraska. They were gathering stories about Black homesteaders. In fact, many of the Black homesteader stories that they were gathering and putting on their website came from the Great Plains. In fact, the University of Nebraska, Lincoln has conducted numerous studies on the Black colonies out of the Great Plains. And this is just a picture and a discussion about the Black homesteaders of the Great Plains. The Homestead National Historical Park reached out to me and said, we understand that you are a descendant of a homesteader. Would you be able to reach out to African-American genealogists or other researchers to find out if they would be interested in finding their land owning ancestors? And I said, well, yes, why not? I mean, my ancestor was a homesteader. If he was one, there had to be others. And so that's how I got involved in this project. Now, I'm going to focus specifically on Louisiana. However, I want you to know that the Black homesteaders of the South, the book consists of 49 stories from Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Louisiana, and Mississippi. So let's focus just on Louisiana. In Louisiana, and this is according to the National Homestead Historical Site, there were 22,988 homesteaders that were proved up, meaning they met the guidelines, they did everything they were supposed to do, and they were successful in obtaining land. There are 18 landowner stories in the Black Homesteaders book. These stories are from 9 parishes: Ascension, Bossier, East Baton Rouge, East Feliciana, Livingston, St. Helena, Washington, West Feliciana, and Claiborne. And I left off one, and that's St. Tammany. Now, who are these people? Well, in looking at the stories, I can tell you they were all over the age of 21. We had men, we had single women, and widows that were homesteaders. Some of the individuals were free people of color. Some were formerly enslaved. Some were even former members of the United States Colored Troops. And some waited as long as 15 years to obtain their land pattern. But what did it take? Well, obviously, they had to have some money. I mean, we're not talking about just a free giveaway here. They had to have some money because they had to put down a small filing fee. They had to have farm tools and seeds and livestock. They even had to have money for transportation, because what they had to do was go and apply. Yes, they had to go somewhere else and fill out an application. They had to go to a land office. They also needed skills in agriculture, animal husbandry, carpentry, blacksmith, and folks, they needed community support. Can you imagine getting 160 acres of land and you doing it without community support? They also needed witnesses. And maybe there are other things that they needed, but I just wanted you, when you start thinking, what would my ancestor need? Think of community support. Now, the goal for everyone was to obtain a land patent. And that meant that this land would be transferred, that is, the ownership of the land is being transferred from the United States government to an individual. And this is what a land patent looks like. This is the original land patent of my ancestor, Peter Clark. And he obtained this land patent in 1896 in Livingston Parish. And so this patent is in, this original patent right now is in the hands of my cousin. So let's talk about this land patent for a minute. And where can you find out if your ancestors received land? You know, I posted on Facebook, did your ancestors get any land under the Homestead Act of 1862? Can you imagine the pushback I received? No, Bernice, no, we didn't get any land. We didn't get land at all. I said, but how do you know? How do you know if you don't check? So resource number one, the Bureau of Land Management. I mean, it's easy to do. Go to the Bureau of Land Management, because what you will find will amaze you. So I went to the Bureau of Land Management. And what can you find? First of all, put in your ancestor's name. Just put in your ancestor's name. And here it is, Peter Clark. He received his land in 1896. I even have the parameters where the land is located, and I know it was Livingston Parish. You also have another page that pops up. Where did he go? He had to go to the New Orleans Land Office to apply for that land. How do I know it was through the Homestead Act of 1862? Well, here it is right here. The authority, Homestead Act 1862. So you know that. And then there are document numbers. One is an application number. The other is a patent number. And Eureka, 159.33 acres of land. So I see this. This is something that you could do right now. Okay, then on the Bureau of Land Management, you will find the patent because it comes up. This is the patent that you will see. I shared with you the original patent, what it looks like, and this is the image that you will find on the Bureau of Land Management website. And this is my ancestor, Peter Clark, my great-great-grandfather, and his son, Moses. Easy enough, right? So, do you think that's it? Guess what, folks? No way. If you find a land patent, if you actually find this document, you are at the end of the process. And what I want to do is take you to the beginning of the process, because he didn't just get this, he just didn't get this land. He had to fill out an application. And that's what we call the land entry case files. Those land entry case files are located at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. And yes, I'm near the National Archives. These are boxes right here. They are all from St. Landry Parish. You can see what's in the box. Look at that. Every single entry in this box is somebody's story. And that's what those land entry papers will tell you. And you can see this is the New Orleans Land Office right there. And so whenever I go to the National Archives and I pull a file, I really just kind of say a prayer, because I'm looking at some old documents. Some of these documents are fragile, but when you get into a land entry case file, a story comes forth, and that's what we're doing. So let's talk about what you can find in that file. You're going to find, of course, the settler's name. They will tell you where they were born, how old they were, when they settled on the land. By the way, when they settle on the land and when they apply for the land may be two different dates. They're going to tell you where the land is located. You're going to find out how much they paid, what was the filing fee, and when they did it. So you're getting a total timeline. You're going to read about the improvements that were made. You also will find out how many individuals live with him. When you read something and it says, my wife and 10 children, wow. You're also going to see either they sign with their signature or an X. You also will find out the names of the witnesses. Also, you will find out when they obtained that land patent and the number of acres. And for some, you will find more. So I already shared this with you about the Louisiana Homesteaders and their land offices. In fact, this office right here is still in existence. It's not a functioning office, but it's in St. Helena Parish, right next to the courthouse. Also, there's a land office in New Orleans that people went to. Some went to Baton Rouge and others to Natchitoches, Louisiana. By the way, I don't know if you saw in that, when I put up the map of Louisiana, we're in South Louisiana and all the way up in North Louisiana, Claiborne Parish. So there's stories from a little bit of everywhere. And this will give you an idea of what happens when someone has applied for the land and they're ready to basically tell the world. It goes in the newspaper. And this is a posting of the homestead entries at the land office in Natchitoches. So let me share with you a few stories. I think I noticed that someone had a Singleton on the list of surnames. Well, this is the story of Moses Singleton. We know because he has put it in his claimant, his testimony of the claimant, he is the claimant, that he was 67 years old when he applied for this land on October the 10th, 1900. That he was born in Louisiana, that he built his house in 1909, that he built a log dwelling, a cotton house. He cleared and fenced 15 acres for 6 seasons, and the land was valued at $300. And when he described the land, it was ordinary pine land and most valuable for farming. Now, how would you know this? How would you know any of this if you did not have the land entry case file? Moses also had to name all of his witnesses: George Raleigh, John Turner, Steve Bell, William Williams. I mean, those are the people that are part of his, some would call it the fan club, his friends and his associates and his neighbors. And there was a register on there. Do any of you recognize that name, Walter L. Cohen? I'll say more about that later. Remember I said it had to be posted in the newspaper? Well, I know what newspaper. Why? Because the information is in the file and the actual notice for publication is in the land entry case file. So I know of this newspaper, Southern Watchman of Clinton, Louisiana, because it's there. It's right there. And then he had to have witnesses. Well, his witness is John Turner. And John Turner is 36 years old. And John Turner basically said or supported everything that Moses Singleton said about his land. Well, he also had to put down this little deposit. Remember the filing fee? Can you imagine how much was $14 back in the day? That was 1900. That was a lot of money back then, but he managed to get that $14 to put in for that filing fee. Now, I mentioned to you all that stories were being written for the Homestead National Historical Park. This is Moses Singleton's story written by one of his descendants. And so I'm very happy and very excited that the descendant took that step. She listened, she watched, she went through the Bureau of Land Management and found her ancestor, Moses Singleton, and she wrote this story about Moses Singleton. So let's start off with another story. I'm taking you to different parishes, by the way. This is Washington Parish. And the individual from this parish is named Laban Brock. He applied September 22nd, 1884. He was 26 years old, described as a farmer and self-employed. And he was from Dillon's, Mississippi, and he lived with someone by the name of William Brock. So Laban then described, when he resided on the land and made improvements and the value of those improvements. So he stated, I actually moved on the land the 1st of January, 1885, and I built a dwelling house, a smokehouse, a crib, a stable, a garden, and cleared about 6 acres valued at $150. This is so amazing to me when I start reading these land entry case files and they're telling you once again what they have done. And here are his witnesses: the Broomfields, Jordan Lee, and Green Andrews. And this is a story that was written by one of the descendants of Laban Brock. Now, I want to point something out to you. On his application, he said that he was residing with a man by the name of William Brock in Mississippi before making his claim. Now, according to the descendant, she stated, this may have been William Brock, a white man, living in Pike County, Mississippi at the time. And it is likely that William Brock was related to or was himself the enslaver of Laban's family. And folks, you'll see these stories. Well, I'm going to take you to another story. This is also Washington Parish. Now, this is a story about Thomas Pittman. Now, Thomas Pittman put in his application on the 12th of July, 1899. Now, in the file, it states that he canceled his application on the 19th of September through what they call a relinquishment. And he did this in New Orleans. Now, on October the 9th of that same year, Thomas went back and he requested that his application be reinstated, slightly less than a month after canceling it. He stated he's a colored man, and he alleges that acting on the advice of friends, he relinquished the entry for the reason of threats of contest by certain white citizens. He's willing to risk the proof now on his original entry, and he had someone else to come in and corroborate what he said. And guess what, folks? His entry was reinstated I celebrated for him because he did not allow himself to be intimidated into losing the opportunity to obtain his land patent. So I mentioned to you that some of the entries are for individuals that were former members of the United States Colored Troops. Well, I did this. This is one of my stories. And this story was written about Josiah Cyprian. And this is in St. Tammany Parish in Covington, Louisiana. So from his primary documentation, this is his words, he stated that around the age of 18 or 20, he enlisted on August 17, 1864 in Company G, the 10th Regiment of the United States Colored Heavy Artillery at the Turo building in New Orleans. I said, let me put this in this man's story because I want folks to understand he was in the United States Colored Troops. He even mentioned where he was born in the Henry Cooper Plantation on the Chifonte River, 15 miles near Madisonville and St. Tammany Parish. Yes, I put it in the story because it's significant. It was important. But he applied for an invalid pension file. And then, despite his disabilities, he also, at the age of 60 years old, submitted a homestead application in New Orleans in 1897 for 40 acres of land. Reading his pension file was like reading a book. And then reading his land entry papers, I was so excited for him and for the Cyprian family. So this is a notice that was in his file, and it's stating the people that served as his witnesses: B. Neal, Emil Bayham, Robert Brown, and Tom Cyprian. Well, I discovered as I began to read and study, others were also homesteaders. So you'll see the Bayhams were homesteaders. You'll see more Cyprian homesteaders. You'll also see that Walter L. Coyne was the registrar. And that is pretty much consistent in many of the applications that I've read during this period, that they had a Black registrar, Walter L. Coyne. So I'm moving on because I just want you to get a feel for some of the stories that are in the book. This is a man named George Paysinger. He settled on his land in 1874. And he went to the land office in Natchitoches. He was a master architect, a builder, a craftsman, and a farmer. And he had many, many achievements. You see this desk? This desk is right now in the Bossier Parish Library. But I want you to see other things. First of all, this is the newspaper posting, which is similar to other newspaper postings. But I went one extra step because I wanted to find out what else was on George Paysinger. By the way, there's quite a bit of information. And so there was a newspaper article in the Bossier Banner in 1908. And with the language of that time, unfortunately, they put in the paper, another good Negro, one of the old time darkies, Uncle George Paysinger died near Roberta on the 9th, and he was 86 years old. Uncle George was born in Houston County, Georgia, and was brought to Louisiana as the property of Hamater and Hodges by Gideon Allen during 1845. As a slave, he was humble and industrious. As a freedman, intelligent and upright. This is one of those from slavery to land ownership. And actually, the more information that has come about, this man's family, they acquired up to 500 acres of land. It's amazing. So let me just give you another resource. I've told you about the Bureau of Land Management. Now, this is another source for you to look at. And it will tell you about the First Land Owners Project. And it's called History Geo. It does require a subscription. Well, when I look at George Paysinger, look at, this is George and where his land was located. Look at Hamilton. This is one of his witnesses. Look at that. He is basically surrounded by these witnesses. And also mention women, right? Yes, women were successful in obtaining land. And this is a story about Phoebe Ann Bartlett Franklin. Now, she obtained her land in Ascension Parish, Louisiana. And there's a lot more about her story, but the most important thing is that her land that she ended up acquiring is near the Waterloo Plantation, which is where she was enslaved with her family members. And here is Phoebe's land right here. This is another ancestor or family member. And her descendant, Kimberly Holmes, wrote, "I am so proud of my great-great-grandmother, Phoebe Franklin, and her industrious and steadfast attitude that has been handed down throughout the generations to the daughters of her maternal line. A formerly enslaved woman did not allow anything to hinder her from pursuing an opportunity that could benefit her and her offspring for years to come." And this is from her great-great-granddaughter. And it's just so exciting, you know, when you can read about your ancestor acquiring this land, and then you have a document. Again, I will emphasize a primary document that is written in her own words because she's the one that's answering the questions. Now, this is another story. This is now a story in Livingston Parish. It's one of the stories that I wrote because this man, Charles Baptiste, was listed in my family Bible. And I was very curious who was Charles Baptiste, simply because he was also a witness for my grandmother when she got married. Well, Charles Baptiste was 35 years old when he applied for his land in Livingston Parish. And he talked about his house. It consisted of 2 rooms and a kitchen. He was the primary caregiver for his mother, and he had several witnesses: Ovid Alexis, M.F. Bradford, Mark Harris, and Adrian Vidal. Adrian was also a homesteader, as well as Ovid Alexis. Why do I know this? Because I strongly encourage individuals, follow the witnesses. If you have a witness, don't just let that name sit there in your family documents. Study that person too. This is Adrian Vidal, the exact same person who's listed as Germasino Vidal. He has a similar application that he established his residence in 1885. He valued that land and what he did as $300. He was from Livingston Parish. His family information included a wife and 1 adopted child. And these are some of his witnesses, of which, because I followed the witnesses, I know that Henry Tinkshell was a witness for my great-grandfather, Peter Clark, and that Benjamin Frazier a homesteader, was also a witness for my grandmother when she got married. So folks, when you start getting into this stuff, you find all kinds of information. So I want to bring you all back to how do you become a part of this project? Well, first of all, I created a Facebook page called The Descendants of African American Homesteaders. These are not organic farmers. These are people that are identifying their ancestors that obtained a patent under that Homestead Act of 1862 that I mentioned. You also encourage to order your land entry case files and then to write a story, to summarize, if you will, what happened. How did they get the land? When did they settle on the land? What did they do? I'm really encouraging you to do this. If we don't tell our story, who will? If we don't identify our land owning ancestors, who will? So this is very descendant driven. And so I want to end by sharing with you the faces of the individuals that contributed to the Louisiana stories. Dr. Dolores Mercedes Franklin, Crystal Williams Jackson, Kimberly Horns, Felix Scott, Clara Robinson, Lyle Gibson, Alvin Blakes, Marilyn Stubblefield, Dr. Rex Holliday, Dr. Antoinette Harrell, Jackie Chapman, Clarita Day, and Caleb Ricard. And for that, I will say to you, let's just keep following the footsteps of our ancestors. Yes, let's follow those footsteps to that land. And then once we find that land, then determine after you have found that land, find out what happened to it. Thank you so much. And I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Bernice. This was great information that you provided all attendees. Let me see if we have any questions right now. We do have one. It says, happy to learn Thomas Pittman fought back and was able to keep his land. So many lost their land due to intimidation, lynching, misuse of eminent domain, credit denial, predatory, third party, etc. Do you have sense of how many families were able to keep their land and pass it on?
Some of our stories do identify that their family members still on the land. I know with my own family, I followed it all the way to 1965 and found that through various tax reasons, they lost the land. And as I said, it went all the way to 1965, but I tracked it. So I do encourage people to go to the courthouses, get as much documentation as you can to find out what happened to that land. But my ancestor died in 1909. His sons still maintain the land. In 1918, they put it up saying he didn't pay taxes. He hired a lawyer and they were going to sell the land on the courthouse steps some kind of way. He bought his land back. The attorney turned around and gave him the land right back. And then in 1925, there was something else with taxes. But I went to the courthouse and I have all the documentation to find out just what happened to that.
And there's a second piece to this person's question, and it says that that's generational wealth. So in searching the records, did you find evidence of the various ways land was taken away from Black homesteaders? That was basically theft.
Yes, in most cases, the land was taken away by way of failure to pay taxes, intimidation. Some were ran off the land. But when you talk about this whole generational wealth, one is that they had funds and they continued to support others when getting land. I found out that many of the witnesses, just think about this for a minute, that the children of the witnesses married each other. And so those children continue to become landowners. Either they did it with that land or they bought other land. But the thought process and the understanding of why land was important was maintained within that family, and they continued to push the need to own land.
Another question was, did you find any homesteaders in New Iberia, St. Martin, or St. Mary parishes?
No, because the descendants, this is a descendant-driven process. And so I have not, as of yet, had any descendants from those parishes to come forth. And this is why I encourage individuals, if you think your ancestors own land, or just go to the Bureau of Land Management and look. This is the thing. Many people don't even know to go and look. And so if there are others in those parishes, please just go look. And if your ancestor didn't get land, maybe the neighbor did. But you also have the census to look at to determine what was your ancestor described in the census under occupation. Were they described as a farmer? If they were described as a farmer, how did they get their land? Obviously, we know that some individuals purchased their land. I have one ancestor, my great-grandfather purchased his land. I have the documentation to prove that. But this land was from the Homestead Act. So you have to look and determine how did they get that land.
Are land entry files retained in cases when a patent was not granted?
In some cases, you will still find the documentation. And you will have to, when you request the record, say they didn't get the patent, but this is the information, this is when they filed. So you can maybe find some more information from the National Archives. And I have actually requested a file of an ancestor who did not get the land. And I found out he didn't get the land because they said it was swamp land or something, and he didn't get it.
You mentioned Texas is not a public land state.
So
Do you know why? It says that all the other non-public land states make sense due to the date of the organization's statehood.
Right, it has a lot to do with the statehood. And they were not a public land state. I mean, you do have a whole big group of the Texas Black colonies. That's another group to study, but it was not a part of this particular act. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the Homestead Act of 1862.
I don't have any more questions in our Q&A, but I didn't know if any of the participants wanted to personally ask a question by raising their hand. Someone did mention that they're familiar with Emily Bayham.
Really? Well,
Emil Bayham, or is it
Emil Bayham.
Emil Bayham. Mhm.
Yes, and there were several Bayhams that obtained land.
Helen, is there a way that you can let Eva speak, because she's the one who mentioned that and she may have
Sure,
some.
yeah.
Eva, can you come off mute? There you go.
Okay. Hi. Yes, I am familiar with Emil Bayham this is my husband's family. The Bayhams are his family. And I'm familiar with him in a line. I can't say a whole lot about him in particular, but I know that he's connected and to my husband's family. I think his great-grandparents were, the mother was Clara, and I think the father was Joseph. But the Bahams as founders, if you will, their ancestors were founders of Madisonville. They are all wrapped up into almost every kind of event in Madisonville. And as Bernice was speaking, and when I saw the name Emil, I went to look in some of my files because I think I had an image of him, but don't hold me to it until I can pull it out, Bernice. But I think I have an image of him. And what you have said here is going to make me look more deeply into that family's land ownership. The one thing about them was that they settled there, beginning with Jean-Baptiste Baham and his 5 sons in the late 1700s. So this Emil and others, when they were land homesteaders, of course, would perhaps take advantage of this in the 1860s. Prior to that, the Bahams, among other groups, were huge landowners in Madisonville. So this is going to make me look more closely at that and some other information that you presented so well, Bernice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And one of the exciting things is that as a homesteader, you will be able to get those land entry papers.
Yes, yes, thank you. Look at that. Thank you very much.
A couple more. Oh, here's one. Are there any homesteaders in St. John the Baptist parish that you may know of?
We don't have any stories of individuals in St. John the Baptist. However, start looking. You know, I would love for you all to just really go to the Bureau of Land Management, start looking. You may be surprised at what you will find, but you have to look.
And then we have another person who said that this is Arlene McCarthy. She says, my 5th great grandmother was, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing her name, Hortensia Marie Baham, and she owned land in Orleans Parish, but I know nothing about other land that her family owned. She was from Madisonville. So Eva, I don't know if that's the connection with you. The
no,
name
but Hortensia
is spelled Hortensia.
So I had a conversation with Leah Chase, and she connected her family, the Langes was her maiden name, to the Bahams. And this is interesting that you'd have a Hortensia Baham, because I think Hortensia was, I'm not looking at any notes right now, so please don't hold me to this. Hortensia was either the maternal or paternal grandmother or great-grandmother to Leah Chase. And I'm not sure if it's this Hortensia Baham or there was another Hortensia, but it's going to make me look at that, because she told me that Leah Chase, Lange Chase, said that she was directly connected to the Bahams. And we didn't go too much farther than that. She explained to me how she was. But now that you mentioned Hortensia, this is making me think that this person may have been named for or was the same person.
This person just agreed with you that she is the aunt of Leah Chase. So
she's the aunt. Okay,
yeah.
Great. Yes. Okay,
were there any homesteaders in Calcasieu Parish?
Okay, so of course there could have been, however, none of the descendants provided the stories for the book. So I just want to emphasize again, the 9 parishes are Ascension, Bossier, East Baton Rouge, East Feliciana, Livingston, St. Helena, Washington, West Feliciana, and Claiborne.
So Natchitoches Parish isn't in that one. So they just asked that. That wasn't in the list you just gave.
Yes.
Yeah.
But once again, please look. I would love to see you all just let's come up with another book. Let's come up with a book just for Louisiana Black homesteaders. Because the book, as I mentioned, it consists of 49 stories. The largest number of stories are from Louisiana and Mississippi. And then we go to Florida, where Florida, we have a large number of stories that have not been written, but we have the names of all of the individuals. Mississippi, we have, as I said, we have about 15 stories from Mississippi. You
Wow.
know we have a lot more people, but you have to know and understand that you have to do the research to find.
Bernice, there's a lot of comments in the Q&A that's very thankful for your presentation, the education you gave people, the resources that you gave them that will help them in their research. So I just wanted you to know that is popping up constantly through here. So so as you're saying these names, that's why is this one, because they're very interested in the information that you're providing. And I think it's Eva's written one real well, where she says Bernice's presentation places geology in its rightful content of historical development. And she says, I encourage others to see their ancestry as she has presented this topic. So it is solely on point with what you're presenting today and relevant to our organization and to our members and also to our guests. So thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you very much.
I don't see any more questions. So I will say this, that which we said that we were going to give a giveaway. And Miss Bernice has graciously agreed to provide a signed copy of her book to one of the attendees today. So I'm going to ask Helen to please pull up our wonderful Wheel of Fortune and spin the wheel to see who's the winner. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have any closing remarks before we do this, Bernice, that you would like to say? I apologize.
Thank you so much. I want to just thank La Creole for just having me share this opportunity to really inspire and to encourage individuals to search for that land. It's just sometimes very difficult to do your genealogy and to have people say Black people never got land, and to know that that's not the case. But when you have the actual documentation, the primary documentation to support that, you have taken your ancestors' story and made it come alive. And so I want to just encourage you all, look for the land, look for it, find it, and tell your story. And thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. So Helen's going to spin the wheel. There's a caveat. You must be present to win. So if your name shows up, please put your information in the Q&A chat room, whatever, so that we can get the book to you.
They are asking for the Facebook page again.
It's called The Descendants of African American Homesteaders.
Thank you.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, wow, Pat won.
Yay.
Well, we have Pat's information.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Pat. So in closing, everyone, I really would like to thank Ms. Bernice Alexander Bennett for doing such a fantastic job in educating us on homesteading and how to document our research journey, as well as our members and guests for their attendance and interaction. We as a group are something special, not only when we are together, but being able to bond socially and virtually. To our guests, I want to extend an invitation for you to visit our website at creole.org. We have quite a bit of information out there that can assist you with your research. We also have where you can go and purchase the publications of our journal, as well as our book, Family Legacies, our history told through stories and tributes. Another resource avenue that we have is our Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel that has recording of programs such as Lifting Layers of Family Secrets, Ensemble, a celebration of history and legacy of Economy Hall, other Coffees and Cousins program, and this just a little bit of our notable programming that we have sponsored throughout the year. If you visit our website, information on membership is available, and as a nonprofit family research organization, we also accept donations. So please consider joining and/or donating to La Creole, because with your assistance, we can continue to produce quality, free programming like you experienced today, as well as assisting with our annual conference. On behalf of La Creole's Board of Directors, thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and have a blessed rest of your day. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful.